Hey everyone, before we get into it today, if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast or taking your current one to the next level, you have to check out Podigy Podcast. They didn't just help us launch this show, which we need a lot of help with. They made it look and sound amazing with custom artwork, killer music, and they guided us through the launching of the show step by step. Now they handle everything for us, editing, producing, you name it. All we do is hit record and they do the rest. Trust me. If you're serious about podcasting, you need them in your corner. Click the link in the show notes to schedule a free one-on-one podcast game plan session with them. You won't be sorry.
Welcome to the Path Podcast, the podcast that provides transformative insights for authentic success. My name is Chris Weiss, and together with my partners, Stuart Ferguson and Toby Quinton, we make up True Path Consulting, where our mission is to maximize executive performance and drive personal growth by guiding leaders on a journey of self-fulfillment and true success. I want to thank you very much for pressing play on whatever device you're listening to us on today. It means a lot that you're here. Our hope is that through our stories and interviews that you will find something in yourself, something that moves you to get curious and possibly something that triggers you to take action in your life. You see, our goal on this podcast and in our coaching partnerships is to help provide people to find their ideal selves without having to need that motivation of that personal or professional crisis. We will bring up topics and curate discussions that will help you take action to find out how you're showing up in the roles that are or that should be a priority in your life, ultimately helping you paint the picture of who you want to be and walking with you to figure out what the heck's getting in your way from becoming your ideal self. We only get one shot at this awesome thing called life, so let's stop being okay with being miserably comfortable and instead be intentional in following a path of meaning and purpose. With that being said, I'd like to more formally welcome my partners that are going on this journey with us. Mr. Toby Quinton, how are you, buddy?
I'm good, bud. Good to see you. Looking forward to today's combo. Feeling good about just kind of the work we've been putting in. I know we've been doing a few of these this week, and I love how connected all of them are to all of us. And I hope that the audience feels the same way. But again, just looking forward to being with you two guys today and talking through what we want to talk about.
Love that, man. Stu, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Top of the day to everybody. I sitting here and I was laughing to myself. I'm thinking, how many of those introductions, at what point are you going to start waking up in the middle of the night with that playing in your head, talk track? Think back when I was a recruiter, I'd wake up at like Sunday night, midnight, doing a G2 in my head. But the concept, I am doing great. I am incredibly present, glad to be here, and excited to get today rolling. Hey, one thing before we get rolling, one thing that's on my mind before we get into the topic today is we would love to get some participation from our listeners and our followers, topics that you think are front of mind or topics that you think you'd love for us to kind of talk through. So send us a message on LinkedIn, shoot us some comments on YouTube, whatever, email us, text us. For those of you that know us personally, we'd love to talk about your topic. So I'm doing great, Chris. I'm ready for today's topic and ready to roll.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks for that. Yeah, we're also reaching out to, some executives via LinkedIn and trying to engage them in what they would want to hear, and some of the topics that we've been through. And we're trying to reach out to people that have a profile, and you can't really see everything on a profile, but that look like they're transformative leaders, that look like they're authentic leaders, that people are a priority. So if we reach out to you, we'd love to hear from you and potentially even have you on the podcast. So we're going to be introducing some guests here shortly as well, as a component of it, and walking through with them, what the work looks like to them and and hosting some people. So you'll be seeing that a little bit, but yeah, it's been great to record these with you. What the people that are listening to don't know, it's, you knock out a bunch of these in a row and, then they intertwine with one another and we talk about one, but we're in another one. And it's been fun. It's been a fun journey, but I'm super blessed to be able to do this with you guys. And, it's been awesome to have the launch of True Path this past week. And we've seen unbelievable success with that. So it's just been a fun journey so far. So, one of the things, speaking of all that, stuff that we have going on, one of the things we want to talk about today is just change, and the impact that change has on your life. So what we want to do, Stu was going to walk it in. It was his idea to kind of talk about this because this was front and center in his life. UPS guy just came to my house, so you probably hear the dogs in the background. But so Stu, I'll pass it to you. Kind of introduce this topic, and we'll start creating a discussion around it. Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Thanks. So I think in the previous podcast, we've talked about some of the career changes that I've been through and certainly life changes that have happened over the years. But, recently in a lot of the one-on-one coaching and conversations I've had with friends and family, this is the topic that comes up more than anything is the change that's happening, not just whether it's a period of their life, well documented, Toby and I are over 50. Our parents are getting older. I've been married for 28 years. There's a lot of things that are going on that are outside of your control or that are within your control. And so, especially in corporate America right now, there's a lot going on in the business world with technology and AI, and then, unique structures. Inflation's had an impact on organizations. And then you look at the change that's going on politically, you look at the change that's going on environmentally. There's just a lot. If everywhere you look, there's evolution happening. Some cases really in good ways and others maybe not so. And so today what I thought we would talk about is just how to navigate change, how to, as an individual, how to process the external events and yet protect you internally, right? This whole thing is about, obviously our podcast is called The Path, and the concept is, that path towards ideal self. And when these outside influences come in, they've thrown me off my path multiple times, whether they were changes that were subtle or big changes. And I think when I look back at those moments, I think if I could have played them differently, I probably would have. I probably would have processed the change differently. I probably would have internalized it differently. And more importantly, I probably would have done a good job of understanding what level of ownership I have in what's happening around me and not take on some of the emotional baggage that comes with the external change that's around us. So again, very broad topic. I had an article that pulled up, that came out in March of this year from Gallup. And it's an interesting article. More than anything, it just validates where a lot of the pressure in corporate America is landing. And you think about the technology, structural, financial challenges that, corporations are having today. What was an interesting data point in the article was that they interviewed like 20,000 people, and 50% of them were managers that said that they were quietly quitting. Now, the report itself talks about that's a historical moment because majority of the quiet quitting tends to happen in non-management positions. But because of this current state and the amount of flux that's going on, they're highly concerned that those executives are mailing it in to a large extent, existing. They're not thriving. They're purely succeeding. So, or more importantly, just living. So I'd love to pull you guys into this.
Comfortable, right?
Yeah, they're miserably comfortable.
Miserable.
That was the word I was trying to hunt around for.
Yeah.
But they find themselves going through the motions without the fulfillment, and more importantly, probably way off their path. And so, Toby, let's switch it up. We always go to Toby. Chris, love to hear just kind of your thoughts around this topic and, how change has impacted you, or more importantly, maybe some best tips or best practices and how you navigate it.
Yeah, I don't know if I've always navigated it great, man, to be honest with you. I think the more confident I was and the more I was aligned to kind of who I am. And if I felt, great about my values, that I think I handled it better. I look back at the changes in my life and when I was accepting of them and when I was all in a good partner of change, I handled them great. When I listened to all the people bitching and moaning about it, and I thought about all the things that were out of my control with it, I probably wasn't the best partner of change, in those situations. So when you think about, the miserably comfortable people and then the people that, just aren't dealing with change, and whether it's business or like whatever it may be, I go to that. I go to like, what role are you where are you in your life that you can handle this change? Where are you in your life that you understand it and are accepting of it? You're empathetic of it, what you're going to go through. And I think when you're in a good place there, I think you can accept that change is inevitable, right? Like it's funny. We're talking about change. I mean, that's something that like we all have to deal with all the times. It's going to be a constant in our life. But I think it all comes down for me in change is where I am in my life. And if I'm confident, again, if I'm understanding of it, if I'm just in a good place, if I'm taking care of myself, right? If I'm taking control of my life, if I'm aligned to my, I attack it. And I'm probably one of the best people to be on your team when you're navigating change because of that. Now, again, there's been times in my career and in my life that it hasn't been good. And I've been in a bad place. And I think, when we're talking about the path, Stu, I think when it kind of depends where you are in your path and really understanding that, to where, I'm doing a keynote with a company, in a couple of weeks. This will probably come out after that, but, I'm talking about, the psychology of change and what is it, right? Like kind of defining what it is and just, we have no control over it. It's constant, it's that surrender that we talked about in a previous podcast. And then, but the second part of is your ownership in it. Like what role do you play in it? And what role do you want to play in it? Like, do you want to be miserable? Cause I think back when I was miserable in change and when I was the guy in the room that was kind of always kind of like, oh, is that really what we should do? Maybe we should do this or, and I wasn't really I was the detractor versus the hard charger in the change. And when I was I didn't like who I was. Like, that's not who I wanted to be. I'd leave those meetings feeling just shallow and just not fulfilled. But when I was attached to it and excited about it, that's when I left those rooms, like, all right, let's go do this. Yeah, so I think, long story. I think it's really where you are in your path and what ownership you have over it. And hopefully I'll get a chance to speak to that audience to get them to go inside even for a minute, in the morning to be like, hey, we're going to talk about change all day. That's what the whole, company meeting's about. They're implementing a new change policy, or program. And it's like, where are you right now? What role are you going to play today in hearing this information and understanding it and adapting it? And then what role are you going to play when you leave this room to your peers, to your partners, to your leadership, so on and so forth. So I think everything's an inside game, man. I think we're finding that out about this podcast. Yeah. For me, it changes kind of an inside game for me. And when I'm good, I'm all in. And when I'm not, I'm a detractor. So what about you, buddy?
Stu, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, one point that you pulled out, Chris, I want to validate is change exposes insecurities within yourself. I think you kind of said that. It's like that's where that curiosity should set in instead of it making it an external, right? What's that internal? Why is that creating that insecurity? And that usually can connect the dot between being that guy that leans in or that individual that's kind of on the outskirts and pushing away. But I think it's such a powerful point. Change exposes the insecurities, and it absolutely does. Toby, what about you? What are you thinking? I know you deal with this quite a bit.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this topic, for the last 5+ years. This has been probably one of the places that I spent the most amount of time. And I spend my time where the people I work with guide me towards, like what's on the tip of their tongue and what's on the top of their mind. And, you've got COVID, obviously, that disrupted everything and created change for all of us, both in the corporate and personal world. But, and then also organizationally, we're working with you guys and the changes that we were going through. And, it's an interesting concept for me in regards to like everyone in their life is going to go through change. So that's one of those things that's a guarantee. But what I find is that, when we create the change and it's something driven from us, a decision we make personally and the decision that we make as a family or as a couple or whatever, the belief systems around that are usually exciting, energized, even with the maybe the road the path that they'll take and the hill they'll climb, it's one of those, like, it's the work that I want to do because it's the change I want to have. And it's interesting in how when we are, got the hands on the steering wheel with it versus change is happening to me. I didn't ask for it. I didn't call this meeting. What do you mean we're going in this direction? And even on your personal lives, as we go, and all three of us have gone through some change with loved ones and friends and in and out and all the other podcasts we've done that they connect to this. But then there's that feeling of insecurities will pop up, the fear, can I handle it? And Chris, to your point, that psychological model that I think is brilliant for anybody that's interested in this topic, the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross change curve, the psychology of change. But again, to get back to my bigger point is, it's around belief systems. Mm-hmm. Do I believe that this change that is happening to me or I'm creating, do I believe that it's an opportunity for me for growth? Will it end up being good for me? Will I end up getting through it? Will this change represent positive things in my life, or will it represent things of loss? And those things will go on. And so I think as a coach, I try to help people try to find the positive belief system around what this change might mean, even those that on the surface look like they're going to be negative. Because most of us, again, through our lives and through the failures and the pitfalls, we usually point to a lot of those change moments in our lives. And sometimes they call it those marker moments, right? And all of a sudden, those marker moments become the very fabric of our character and our values, and who we've become is because of the change we went through. But it's hard to go through, when you're in the middle of it. Every human I've ever, and this is my belief, I don't believe that humans like change, right? It represents a loss of control in many ways. Even the positive ones, they cause some excitement, some distress. I'm going from a state that I know and can trust to a new state. Even if it's a desired state, it's still a change for me. So what I do think, though, is that the best, the highest performers, the people that are most successful, are when they look at their beliefs around what the change might mean. And they're curious to themselves of, what can I get out of this? How can this serve me? What road or what path will this take me down? And it's around really slowing down enough. And to your point, Chris, that inner game, it's the inner game of just settling down and saying, okay, I may not have asked for this, but this is what is now. And how do I look at it and reframe it in a way where it's something of an opportunity for me and it's something that will end up being a gift for me? But how do I successfully navigate change? So it's a lot there, but I think it's always been interesting to me that if we got our hands on the steering wheel and we're making this change, even though we're uncomfortable, we're excited as hell, and we usually are very committed to it. But when someone is moving our cheese, that old book that we all have read, then all of a sudden, can I do it? Do I want to do it? Why is this happening? And we go down that rabbit hole. And, I think it's just, it's a lot with just the human experience. And so how can we help our listeners and each other and the work we do as coaches help people just kind of take a moment of this, of time and really think about what this change might represent?
Stu, you're on mute, buddy.
You're on mute, Stu.
This is Stu's
the best part of the podcast just happened. You guys didn't hear it. God, I'm such a rookie on so many levels.
Hey, hold on one sec. Do this. We'll do that. And then they'll
have to take it out.
They'll edit it. Yeah. Okay.
Toby, there were so many good points. The one thing I kept writing down, and this is my immature way of kind of explaining it. You've heard me talk about this. It's hunt or be hunted, right? In that concept of, when you're being hunted, when things are happening to you, that visceral reaction. But when you, from a belief system, can identify the opportunity and you make it about your change, it's a far different feeling. And my experience has been far different results. I would say that throughout the vast majority of my career, and I'll speak on Chris's a little bit just because I was able to witness a lot of it, that was a secret sauce for us, was the ability to get aligned and to be able to understand the change. Now, there was a ton of work that had to be done, and we're talking about a work setting for a minute. Well, I think there's different probably responses to different scenarios to a large extent, but at a work setting, I was just curious. Instead of feeling threatened or feeling judged, just got super curious on the why, the how, and the when. And how it was, designed and how the impact would cascade to impact me. But it was also the relationships, right, with the people that were making the decisions, because to a large extent, I may not have agreed with the business change. I may have had a different feeling, but I believed in my leader, right? And I believed in the person that was charged with executing on this strategy. So that feeling of camaraderie and partnership, I wanted to be a part of a community, right? To your point, being that guy that's the naysayer on the sidelines is a lonely, miserable place to be unless you're passionate about what you're pushing back on. But that ability to find community and to find inclusion and change is mission critical. And what I would just say is, I tell my kids this all the time, who you hanging out with, right? Like, there's things going on, and there's going to be a population of people that are going to be the naysayers and the ones that are pushing back on change. And then there's others that are going to look at it as an opportunity and look at it as a chance to move ahead. And I personally like to surround myself with people that are optimistic of change. And again, I'm talking about a corporate setting, work setting. And so if you're out there and you're listening to this and your company or your organization is going through change, I would just encourage you to get really, really curious, because back to Toby's point, it's that the answers to those curious questions that help alter the belief, right? And change the belief system that ultimately can put you in a place to where you can execute. Chris, what you were going to say something? What do you think?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I look at change and the keynote I'm giving, it talks about supporting each other, right? Yep. And there's communication, there's empathy, and there's leadership, the components of that support, right? And when you look at just empathy, I think about my last role as VP of strategy. I mean, we had to implement and innovate.
You were change.
I
lived
in change, right? Yeah. And I feel like where we had the best results, and when we had the best results, is when we communicated properly, when people had an understanding of what we were trying to do and had empathy for the change itself and what it was going to take to change. And people realizing that, like, my department, my team was guiding that change. I think because of our relationships that we had, that people had empathy for us, right? Like, they didn't want to be disruptive. They didn't want to be the disruptor. They didn't want to be the person in the middle of the room. Now that doesn't mean that we didn't have the people that were kind of, the devil's advocate and challenging. Yeah. You totally need that. You need to create that environment, but they were empathetic and understanding and caring and compassionate about, like, the tasks that we had to do. And they were understanding in where we wanted to go and why we were making the change. Hopefully we did a good job communicating that. So there's a leadership component of that from us and the team making the change, but there's also a leadership component from the people going through the change to step up as that leader to say, I'm on board with you. Let's go. And to help facilitate that change. Then I think about, major changes in my life. And, I a bunch of years ago, I decided to, change my diet, pretty significant change. And I remember I was going in and Joy had made me, chili or something and I forgot to tell her. So communication is kind of important when you're not going to eat meat anymore and your wife's cooking, she makes chili, but she knew why I was doing it. And I had, so my father had some health issues with his heart and stuff. And I just wanted to change the direction my family was going in as far as that's concerned. So I decided to make some pretty drastic changes. And, we had a little bit, she was a little frustrated that I didn't tell her. Communication is kind of important, but I was unsure of myself and I didn't want to create an issue and blah, 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 blah. So I was I was just kind of figure it out myself. I realized that I can't figure it out. You can't change by you need help. You need support. You need the partnership of people that care about you, especially in that case. So, she quickly jumped on board because she had empathy and understanding about why I wanted to make the change. And she knew how hard that change was going to be, especially living in the corporate world back in, the 2000, steakhouse, all this other stuff. So, she was super, super supportive and she jumped on board and she educated herself and we changed our menu at night and we changed our style and our rhythm around how we cook and blah, 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 blah. That's just a small example of someone, a partner understanding why you want to go through the change, having empathy and kindness and care and compassion for you to help you and assist you make that change. And it's not in a corporate setting, but she was a leader for me. Like she was my partner, and she stood up and said, no, we're going to do this. We're going to do this together. I've been doing it for, I don't know, that was probably 15 years ago. So, I just look at some of the characteristics and some of the people and the positions that people play, whether in your life or at work, that need to step up and help an organization change or help you change, whether it's a diet or whatever you want to change in life, how you communicate, whatever it may be. So I think the role players and the people that you associate, you brought up that, Stu, the relationships that you have with people. Now, again, big corporations, like how do you create those relationships? But I think, you over communicate, you need those change agents. You need those leaders that are going to jump on board and have, people that will follow them. You have that followership. And then eventually you get to the point where you can move the whole company and make the change that you want to see. But I think relationships and empathy and communication and leadership are vital to whether personal or professional change.
Yeah, but I want to get Toby in here. One thing that I'll pass it over to, but the thing that keeps coming back to me is from a corporate setting is the idea of majority minority when it comes down to change. And the reality is the individual with the thought of change is the minority at the beginning. And you're not going to become, that thought's not going to become the majority of belief if it's cascaded through events and proclamations and corporate statements and emails. It's about moving one person at a time, one conversation at a time. It's about that, creating that space for curiosity, insecurity. It's also creating a space for pushback on the change. But one by one, and over time, you become the majority of thought. And that methodology has served me for 27 years, even at home. When my wife and I wanted to move, we've moved a lot. And this has been a topic for my family quite a bit. We've lived through a lot of change. We've moved over 10 times in my career. And so to go to my children and talk about that, and imagine moving children that many times, the trust and the relationship that has to be founded. And so it's, I would start with my wife, get her on board, make sure she was good, go to my oldest, and then bring my youngest along. But by the end of it, all four of us were locked arms and we were committed to the change and making it great. And so I think regardless of how you go about it, that partnership and that coalition of change is mission critical. But it starts with you understanding that just because an email, a big meeting, a national meeting, I've stood on stage many a times and made proclamations. The change never got executed the way that it could have. But when I interacted with small groups, individuals, before you know it, that the buy-in, the belief system starts to change. Toby, what are you thinking, bud? I know
no, this is great. Listen, as an executive coach for as long as I've been and been around leaders for the 30 years that I've been either one or worked with leaders, my belief around this is that the leaders are the ones that blame the followers for not, getting on board with the change. But they really are the ones that, in my opinion, need to do better. And do better, Chris, from that point of view of communication. We tend to communicate less. At least this is what my observations have been while we're in this change. So the executives make the change happen, to your point, Stu, and they're committed to it and they love it and they think it's the right decision for the organization. But then we tend to just really not communicate effectively thereafter. And I come from a point of view that I believe human beings, as much as I said at the beginning of this, that I believe that people are uncomfortable with change. Everyone I've ever met, even though some say, I'm great with change, really what they're great with is how to manage change. And they're really good at it, which is and I believe that. But I think most people have an immediate discomfort with it. That being said, though, I do also believe that human beings are resilient and we will get through change. I think most people that I know have survived those situations of change they didn't ask for, that were traumatic or even less than that, but certainly seemed traumatic at the time. And we are a resilient bunch. And I think that when leaders start to then, I hate to say it, but like they coddle the audience, or they play this game of, I won't give them all the information because I don't want to spook them. The truth is they're spooked by you not giving us information through change. And that's what's causing a lot of that, because when we aren't informed with what the impact's going to be, what this change means to me, how it'll impact my future, how will it change a lot of where I'm headed in regards to a corporate setting, there's a lot more that goes on that most leaders don't put the price tag of how much these folks are worrying, whilst you try to save them from an incomplete truth. Like, I don't know for sure, and I'll wait till I know, and then I'll tell you. And time again, I'm working with the executives to say, tell them you don't know. Tell them what you do know to the degree that you do, but tell them you don't know all of it. And that's okay, because if you can communicate what you do know to them, that will at least help them get a little more settled with, there's a rhyme and reason, there's a decision being made, there's a plan that's being put forth. And oh, by the way, some of them might, be upset that you don't know completely at all right now, but most of them will just be happy to know what the process is that you've already come to, and what your process will be to further, advance what they need to know in terms of what this change is going to mean. So I think it's so easy to blame the people that, didn't make the decision for change, and they're left with, the insecurities and the doubts and the worries about that. And again, some of them need really good help and coaching around how to handle change and manage change and work through the cycle of change. But I think if leaders could listen a little bit more to that, let's over communicate even when we don't know fully baked what this all might mean. So it just came up for me as you guys were both talking of just in the trenches with these guys and girls that I've been coaching with. I'm always leaning into them of, hey, just tell them you don't know fully, but tell them what you do know. And that in itself is really powerful for the group.
And freeing for that leader. That imposter of carrying that false identity of clarity, or that you have all the answers, is just so exhausting. And I think it burns out a large percentage of young leaders, is not being transparent and authentic about where they really are, about the business or about their strategy. And I definitely struggle with that at times, but, not to pivot, but I'm, as you were talking, Toby, I'm just thinking about, I've got a buddy that, no matter what direction he looks, he sees chaos, whether it's his company, his personal relationships, his health, like his family, like he's just stuck. He's in that vortex where everything sucks and everything feels like change is happening around him and he has no control over it. And that's an extreme case, but I'm just thinking of the people that might be listening, because I've certainly been there myself, where I feel like I have no control over anything, and that the life is happening at such a pace that I'm overwhelmed. I'm certainly struggling to get my version of control, right? And I hear this a lot at different phases. I think about when Shelley and I first got married, there was a whole list of new changes that were going on, coexisting in the same house. When having a child, my first child, a lot of change, there was a lot going on. But I can also remember buying a house, and the next year having like 50% of my bonus being cut, and me going, oh shit, what do I do? And then I look and I've got my wife and I are fighting. And then I look over here and my dad's getting old. And it's like, how much can I handle? How much, and how do I show up healthy for all the other people that are counting on me? So I'm just curious. Advice for those people, because I think there's probably a lot more of them out there right now in this current moment than maybe in past years or past generations. I just feel like there's a lot of pressure on individuals. And so we chalk it up as change, but you said something really powerful, which is it intentional change or is it happening to us? I'm just curious on what you guys are thinking or advice you give that person.
Chris, you want me to go real quick?
Yeah, go ahead, buddy.
What I think is, Stu, I always try to help people find and push them to get into that exploratory moment of, even though you believe you can't control anything, what do you control?
Yep.
And at the very, very minimum, our mindset is what we do have control over. And I don't want this message to go out that that's easy. I think change fatigue is real. I think that without question is real. I also think that, one of our earlier podcasts around doing the work, that people don't understand the impact of their lives to this point. To your point, I've moved 10 times. You've had an association, like you have a relationship with change.
Yep.
And depending on how all those 10 moves went, your relationship might be a negative one, or one that it really didn't work very well for me. And regardless of that learning aspect, which is great, and it's a good part of it, but maybe there was more on it was really pain in the rear and this, that, and the other, and I lost money in the deal, or this. So our association and relationship with change has to be looked at as well. So again, a controllable factor to this. We can all spend some time doing the work with ourselves on, in general, what's my relationship with change? How do I perceive it? And what do I then now control in this? Because I really do believe that's what we got to get to. We got to get to helping people see what control they do have when they feel they have none. And those that are exhausted, to honor that I'm exhausted. Hey, I am exhausted with the fast pace of all this change that I went through, whether I asked for it, whether I feel like it was positive or not. I'm exhausted and fatigued by that. So I would just say, what do you need?
Yeah.
What do you need to really just kind of honor that you're fatigued? What do you need to get yourself back to a place where you feel that you can objectively now look at the field and say, okay, now what are my choices? What do I have control of? And how will I proceed as I move forward? So that's just a quick hit there. Sorry, Chris, to jump in front of you on that, but that's what I'm thinking.
No, quick hit. That was awesome.
Like
think about
that.
We don't talk about our ownership and our relationship with change. We just don't. And it's kind of like, I don't know, who do you want to hang out with? The dudes are the people that are, it's John. It's like always this big thing. I mean, those are the people that I want to remove myself from the room with. I want to be with people that can take on because of their experiences. I look back at the change I had in my life, and I'm sure in the moment it was super stressful. Like Stu, I'm with you, man. I bought my dream house, and then 2008 happened. The Great Recession of 2008 happened. And literally it was like, holy what did I just do? Like so stressed, but now yet, like, how many years later, and I've raised my kids in this house. Like this is, I have the best memories in the world in this house. I talked about my diet. Like I made a change 15 years ago, and I feel unbelievable. I'm the best looking one in this group. I'm the most healthy one in this. I mean, it's like, look at what happens. I have hair. Like, look what happens when you change your diet. Be joking. But like, there's good that happens from change. I changed my career. I wake up in the morning with a vigor and a passion and an enthusiasm to write my book and build this company with you and do this podcast and impact clients. Right? Like there's a coaching technique, Toby, where it's like, when someone's in it and you want to get them grounded, right? It's tell me about a time where change worked for you, and just to get them reframing, right? The reframing of that negative experience they had. Well, cause they can't all be negative. But for some reason, they choose to focus on that negative. And us as coaches, it's important for us to give them both perspectives and potentially give them some reframing tools to say, wow, maybe this isn't that bad. Because in truth, change develops people. It drives personal development. It builds resilience in individuals. You gain new skills. You gain fresh perspectives. Like there's all these things that change, if looking at it the right way, can do good for you. So I think, to answer your question, Student, I'm just kind of topping on top of Toby because I thought it was so important there. Well, what you said, man, I think that our relationship would change, but there's also some groundedness exercises that people need to do when you're so overwhelmed. There's been points in my corporate career, man, I was so overwhelmed with all the change and being insecure and being an imposter that I was completely debilitated and handcuffed. And there was a time in my career that I couldn't leave my office. Like physically, like I was scared to leave my office because there was just so much going on. And what I saw myself doing, and it wasn't you at that point, Toby, I was early in my career, but it was another coach start helping me unpack each individual component of change that I was stressed out about. And walked me through the individuality of that and allowed me to cope with it and deal with that not all of them at once and create a big shit pile, where I was just overwhelmed and couldn't get myself out from underneath it. But it was, let me attack one at a time. And let me look at things individually so that I can give myself that first step and that second step and that third step. So there is a groundedness component of this when you do feel overwhelmed and you are gripping it to just, get regrounded. Let's catalog what's really going on in your life. Let's figure out what your relationship, brilliant Toby, with change really is and who you want to be and where you want to go from it. But yeah, I think that groundedness is a huge component of just managing and dealing with change as well.
Really well said.
Chris, real quick, sorry, Stu, I didn't know this topic was going to get my attention as much as it did, but I brilliant what you're saying in that regard. And what I want to it requires great coaching. Change does. And it's everything, Chris, that you just said, Stu, I know you're doing with the people you're working with, and I've done as well. It's not convincing people that this change is going to be the greatest thing that ever happened to them. That's what most leaders try to do. It was my idea. You're going to love it when you experience it, and you're going to be a better human for it. The truth is, we're here to inform them of the information around why this change is happening and why we've decided to do it. And they may not agree with it, but this is the decision that we've made. And how do we help you, or how do I help you as a coach work through what you ultimately want to work through? Nobody's sitting there wanting change to derail them. Nobody wants to stay in this constant state of being unsettled and not grounded in what they're doing for a living or how they participate and what their roles are in their lives. So we're all on the same page. It's just, and I know this is a personal thing, I don't need you convincing me that your idea is a great idea. What I need your help to inform me what you see, why you see it, and why ultimately you made the move that you did if you're my leader. And coach me, help me through finding this place where I then can look at this from a different mindset, a different belief system, and a different point of view. And I promise you, I want to get there, but I know me well enough to know that if you just try to take, this convincing stance versus this coaching stance, I just think there's a much more efficient way to go about it. And both of you guys are nodding with me. Thus, the reason why I think it's powerful to have a coach and have coaching methodology. Yeah. And whether you have a coach or whether your leader can go in a coaching moment there, I don't care how you get there, as long as we're helping people navigate change.
So, not devil's advocate, but and I'd love for you to push back on this, is what if I don't have time? What if the change has to be abrupt and immediate? What if the decision, and I don't have time to cascade it the proper way, or I know it has to go quick. I think there's, business leaders listening that find themselves in that moment, and it's a judgment call. How do I do this? Right? I've got to make this pivot. How's the best way to care for my people and to make sure this change is successful when maybe I don't have the resources, or I may not have the skill, or I may not have the time to be able to communicate it proactively.
I love it.
Hey, can I take that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. That's a great question.
Sometimes, if you're working in corporate America, it's kind of like tough shit.
Yep.
You're working for a company. There's a component of just knowing your responsibility as an employee too, and you're not going to like everything. You're not. I mean, last thing we had to do is we had to digitize our organization and automate our organization, right? And conceptually, it's like, dude, let's do it. We're going to save money. We're going to do that. I mean, awesome, right? And everybody's on board until you insert the human being and the impact it has on them. And so I'm not going to do that anymore. You're going to automate. Am I going to have my job? And fear sets in and all this other stuff. So our leaders were having a hard time having that conversation with people. But at the end of the day, we got to a point where it's kind of like, we're going here.
Yeah, no choice.
You gotta own the fact that we're going here as a company, and that's just welcome to corporate America at the end of the day, right? And I don't mean to be a jerk about it, but I mean, there's a component to understanding your role as an employee and in how do I become a great employee for my organization, and realizing and surrendering a little bit too. There's a huge surrender component. I know we just did a podcast on that the other day, but like there's a huge surrender component where it's like, I trust my leadership. Like I trust they have my best interest in mind. And even if this might hurt me, and even if this has an impact on me or my finance or whether people, blah, 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 I trust the organization. I trust the leader in the organization. And I'm going to play my role as an employee. And as much as I don't agree or like it or whatever, it's going to impact me, I have to serve my role and move forward, because hopefully it'll all work out in the end. So I don't know if that's always the answer. Toby might have a different one, but I think there's a component of just understanding the role you play in corporate America.
I love that from the employee standpoint. And it's a simple adage of, hey, this bus is leaving, the train is leaving the station is what I meant to say. And you're either on it or you're not, right? So we'll delete the rest of what I said prior to that. But if we flip the other side though, right? And we looked at, I think, Stu, what part of what you were asking is if I'm the executive asking the question to myself, like, I don't have time to over communicate and to really kind of roll this whole blueprint out for everybody, because the level certainly that you were at, it's not effective. You'd have too many conversations. Here's what I know, being a coach at multiple levels within an organization: you don't have time not to, because engagement is at risk when people are unsettled with the change you're proposing and taking us on, no matter how good you feel it to be. How then can you empower the groups under you that are responsible as, and I put it in air quotes, but they are leaders for you, to empower them on what do we need in this moment? We need great coaching. What do we need coaching around? We need to help people understand what this change represents, the impact it could play on them, the impact it plays on our organization. And when we don't do that, the amount of people that are worried and spend endless amount of time worrying at the job that they're in, and you don't know they're worried. They're not telling you they're worried, and they're disengaged, and they're not completely committed, and they know their future's up in the air now, and they start to go down the rabbit hole of every worst case scenario because they haven't been informed and we're not coaching them through. So as a coach, I'd go back and say, Mr. or Mrs. Executive, I don't think you can afford that. Because I don't think you understand, if you're really thinking bottom line and revenues and performance and efficiency, all of that's at risk when you don't slow down enough now to run faster later. It's just kind of what decision you want to make. And to me, it's just one of those harsh realities as a coach. I got to just kind of lean in. Hey, this is my perspective. You know, I may not be right in this, but my experience would tell me that this is an opportunity for you right now to take some time and really communicate and over communicate in this instance.
Yeah. I'm glad that's how you responded to that's, I think we all have more time than we believe we do, especially at the highest levels of the organization. You dictate time, unless there's, investors and other things that are out there. But, what I would tell you is, if you are in that situation where you have to make a decision, there has to be a pretty thorough, committed plan following it on how you're going to engage and communicate. Like, making the decision's one thing, but that you're not done. And I think what happens when we're in that quick decision-making situation is we make it, and then we go back to fighting fires, and we assume that it'll cascade properly, that people get it. And there's a whole lot of assumption. And the only thing I would ever have tweaked on how I've done it in the past is, certainly, if I have to communicate change, communicate it, but then understand that my responsibility shortly after that is to bring in small communities of people to make sure that they understand the purpose, the why, the how, and the when, and to be able to ask the hard questions that are on their mind, and to create an environment that's incredibly safe. Because to check the box to create a bunch of touch points without creating safety is useless. You might as well just do a proclamation. Having community with interaction and that leader being very, very curious about how these people are being impacted by change, and more importantly, how do we get them to align to it, is even more important. But Toby, I was going to answer my own question, but I'm so glad you hit that out of the park. I knew you would.
Thanks, buddy. And I think Chris's point's really good too, though. I mean, that's the other part of it, is that I just, we're not over here trying to blame leaders and executives about change. I think it's absolutely necessary. And those that don't make changes and don't evolve, we know how those stories end. So it's an absolute critical piece to executive leadership. And frankly, an employee might come to the decision that I don't like the change. It doesn't connect with what I'm up to. And to me, and again, I get to say this as a coach, you're better off without them and they're better off without you because we're leaving the station and this is the direction we're taking. And so we sometimes, because it's such an emotional thing, we can get too emotional about it. And to me, it's a lot more about the information and communication precision on that regard. And if we do that right, I think, again, we have people that are more engaged and more understanding of where we're headed and why. And then the leaders can feel a lot more comfortable and trusting that the group is with us and that the team's behind us and that we'll go about implementing this change.
Awesome.
Love it.
I know we got yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Hey, Stu, can I just walk one small, one kind of switching gears a little bit? When you told us we wanted to talk about change a little bit, one of the things that was kind of personal to me that came up in change is not only in a corporate setting, but in a personal setting and corporate. It happened to me both. When you try to change and when you change and when people don't allow you to, right? When and I just think there's this is all encompassing, right? It's your mindset of change. Are you willing to do it? Who do you want to be? I always wanted to be that person that was on board. Let's go. I believe in where we're going. I was fortunate to be at the table with the strategy and understanding the stories and where we're going and why we're going there and so on and so forth. So I was privy to that, which helped. But once we made a decision, I was on board, whether I liked it or not. I wanted to be that player for my team, for my family, for whatever role. I always want to be that player. And one of the things I always want to be for my friends is supportive of the changes they're making in their life. But, that always wasn't my case. I'm a huge change guy. I want to just get better. Right. And I think if you coach and if you're willing to go be coached by someone, you got to understand, that's what it's about. It's about just figuring out who you are, but who do you want to be and what's getting in the way and what changes need to happen to become that person. I don't know. I had a little bit, I was doing a run this morning and I was thinking about this and it kind of took me back to just the times in my life that I tried to change from a corporate perspective and even a personal perspective. And the people that showed up for me that supported that change and how much that showed me who they were and the roles they played in my life. And then the people that didn't. And the people that wouldn't let me change and didn't want me to change because it may have negatively impacted them in some way, shape, or form, or that was the story they told themselves. So I think change is complex, man. It's not just are you willing to, but I think, Toby, your relationship to it, who you want to be around it, how you want to show up when you're in the midst of it, but also how you want to show up when you're supporting someone or an organization or something that is trying to change. And I just think it's understanding both of those roles, I think is really important when you're talking about change. So just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if it kind of sidelines us.
That's a whole nother podcast, to be honest with you, about, how to be a great supporter of change, right? Of people. The three of us have been through a lot in a very short period of time. And one of the things that I love about this company, and certainly the three of you guys, is how we show up for each other through change. And that's something that is very unique and very special and something that I cherish. But I know we're bumping up on time. So, any final thoughts, Toby, before I've got one thing I want to share now.
Yeah, I'll just hit real quick. One hit on Chris, what he said on the personal side, which thanks, Chris, for bringing this back to the whole human, which I think is important to every podcast we do. It's so indicative of how uncomfortable humans are with change, is that when someone close to us and a friend goes through some change, how we do or don't support them is so indicative of our discomfort with change. I had a buddy that lost a ton of weight and he needed to lose the weight, but he lost a lot of weight. And then what we started doing? Started making fun of him being skinny and not eating and this, that, and the other. And even Chris, I sat right in front and watched for years of you making this change about how you eat and all the comments about you not eating a certain way and certain foods and all of that. And it's just, again, it sounds funny But it really, what it is again, that's humor masking our own insecurities. And when we see someone go through change, we feel triggered by it and we're uncomfortable by it, because then we all of a sudden have to look at ourselves and go, well, maybe I need to make a lifestyle change. And it's just an interesting concept about that. And that's why I think change becomes so difficult for a lot of us, because there's a lot of headwinds. Even loved ones and friends that we near and are close to us, they aren't there helping us and pushing us along or whatever else. So the only point I wanted to make on that was setting up conditions for you to be successful throughout change are as important as understanding what that change represents. And those conditions have to be creating some feedback from people around you, some help from people around you, so that you understand this isn't a path you'll take alone. You got to take it with people. So, and to your point, Stu, the three of us, we walk together on this, and we're there for each other on this. And we're also very aware of what changes each one of us is going through. And so I do believe that that's the recipe of successfully navigating it, amongst the very other things that we got to do. But anyway, I think it's just a great personal touch to it, Chris. So I appreciate you talking about that.
You got it, man.
Awesome. Chris, I'm going to give you the last close us out here. You know, the only thing I wanted to share was a conversation that Chris and I actually had this morning. And yesterday we had recorded some podcasts, and I think in between, or maybe on one of them, I said, you know, I was concerned of constantly sharing my development or my vulnerability of change, because I want to show, you know, the audience that I'm a work in progress, or more, that I've arrived to some extent. And you said something really powerful, and you're like, bro, the change never stops. Like, the work never ends. And so this feeling of change is constant. And to your point, Toby, the community that you have around you, but more importantly, the work that you do inside. And I think, Chris, your point around groundedness is just the key, I think, to really understanding how to be a change agent versus a change distraction or detractor. It really comes down to you. So this has been great. Thanks for letting me walk this one in. It's been a great conversation. Chris, I'd love to get your final thoughts and wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks. That was an awesome conversation, Stu. And thanks for putting that out there and being that vulnerable. Like the work is never done. And change is always happening. You and I talked about when I was ripping, what my kids call it, ripping reels on Instagram or something. And some guy came up, some world-renowned psychologist came up, and I'll try to put it in the show notes, but because it was powerful. And the podcast, the host was saying, well, yeah, my sister and I grew up and we were raised by the same parents. And he was like, he cut him off. He goes, no, you didn't. Like, you weren't raised by the same parents at all. How old are you? Oh, I'm this, I'm that. They were like 4 years apart, whatever. Yeah. Your parents were completely different people and completely changed people by the time your sister came. And by the way, she's a woman, and there's different societal norms of how to parent a woman and how to parent a son. And like, your parents change so much from the first child to the second child. There's a whole societal norms on that, and just feeling and comfort and confidence with that. So like, even as parents, it just struck me, because like, I'm always wondering what I have all my issues, right? And I'm always wondering what issues my kids are going to have, because it's like, we parented them all. My wife and I parented them all the same. And it's like, no, we didn't. I think about when we had Aiden, we were a mess. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. I was trying to build my career. I was traveling. She was like being a mom for the first time. We just moved into a new house. Like, we were so stressed out. Thank God he's turned out so well so far. You know, I mean, he's kicking ass in life. But like, then by the time we had Parker, and even definitely Tanner, with Tanner, we're so chill. I mean, you hear that, right? The third, it's like, yeah, whatever. But like, I think because we've changed so much as parents. Some not good. He watches The Boys, and I don't know if you guys watch that on Amazon, but it's dark and awful, right? So you probably shouldn't have your 15 or 16-year-old son watching it, and you can judge me all you want, but it happened. I'm a terrible parent, whatever. I regret it. Yeah. But like, my point is, like, I'm secure in my relationship with him and where he is in life and blah, blah, blah. But my point is, like, you change throughout. And for you to just say that, even as coaches, we're changing and we're doing the work with our clients. right? Like we're doing the internal work too. It's just, we can help them through our training and our understanding and just experiences to help them get to where they want to go to achieve their ideal self. So I appreciate it, Stu. Hey, I'll end with a quote that I'm putting in my keynote, and it says, embracing and managing change is not only about understanding its nature and psychological impacts, but also about recognizing and acting on the individual responsibility to adapt and thrive. And I think thrive is the one, like, to adapt and thrive. And if you're going to constantly be a detractor of change, it's gonna impact you. And the people that are around you. So, your individual responsibility to adapt and thrive. So, I appreciate it, Stu. Great conversation, man. Great talking to you guys. And hey, for the audience, thank you for joining us on the path. Remember, every journey is unique and every step you take shapes that journey. Keep exploring, stay curious, and give yourself grace as you forge your path. Until next time, stay true to yourself and keep walking the path.